So they're by and large pretty remote locations. And if you think some people would have said that the idea was to assimilate the indigenous people, well, it's pretty hard to imagine how you can assimilate when you've got this. But anyhow, that's it. Now, the next thing that you might wonder is that they're on their reserves or communities, whatever you want to call them. And this went on from the 1880s to 1990s. How did they get from their homes to the schools? I don't have all the answers, but here are a couple. So where your kids are, somebody came and there's a book called The Knock on the Door. They come and take the kid. They put them on, in this case, there are other methods, but this is one example where they put them on the truck and they are taken away. The parents don't know where they're going. They don't know why they're going. Well, they sort of do, but they don't know when or if they're coming back. How do I back this up, Graham? So anyhow, while we're doing that, the inhumanity of the so-called residential school system has been well documented. It went from about 1883 to, not about, no, the very front. One more. Thank you. Thank you. From 1883 to 1990s, that's been well documented particularly in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which ran from 2008 to 2015, during which thousands of survivors were interviewed. And I won't go into too much into that, but I'll mention here that by the mid-1900s, the government recognized that the goal of the residential school wasn't achieving its objective, which was to end the Indian problem. So then they came up with another solution. Now, and it has this very nice sounding name called the 60s scoop. Now, in this case, what they did was they still took the children, but this time they didn't give them back. They had them adopted by white people, changed their names, and it, generally speaking, destroyed their birth records. So that's Canada. So how do we get to our shirt day? Now, that started in 2013. There was a meeting of survivors, and one of the survivors, her name was Philip Webstead, and she told the story of when she was being taken away, that she had a shiny new orange shirt, and it was taken away when she was taken away. So they just said, well, you know what, that's going to be the symbol for, that's going to be our symbol for understanding residential schools. Now, in 2021, as I mentioned, the federal government declared September 30th would be Truth and Reconciliation Day. Now, it's a day, but we all know that reconciliation is a very ongoing process, acknowledging both the history of the residential schools, acknowledging the truth about the land taken away. And I don't know if it's coincidental or not, but 2021 was also, you may recall, the year that we started getting reports of unmarked graves at the residential schools. After a presentation about the history, Chief Donald Miracle from Tyendinaga was asked, what do we do about this? And he said, educate. And that was about it. And then last year, Murray Sinclair, the chair of the Royal Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, he wrote an article on, and I'm going to quote from the article. He said, education got us into this mess. Education can get us out. A chronic, national, and systematic erasure of Indigenous peoples has sanitized Canadian history and has led to a profound misunderstanding of the contributions Indigenous cultures have made to Canada. Education has perpetrated some of the worst harm in our national history, damaging public attitudes and facilitating brutal, divisive policies. Canadians see the dysfunction that exists in many communities, but have no idea what caused it or why it happened. Indigenous peoples have experienced the worst parts, but Canadians have also been hurt by being manipulated and misled by the idea that Canada has traveled a just, inclusive, and civilized path. He continues, education holds a key to reconciliation. All students need to learn that Canada didn't begin with Jacques Cartier in 1534, and nor did it begin in 1867, as some seem to believe, which is incomprehensible to me, but nevertheless. They also need, so he continues, they need to learn why they negotiated the treaties, and the treaties were negotiated with purpose and integrity and in good faith. They need to learn why Indigenous leaders why they fight so hard to defend those treaties and why they have been ignored by consecutive generations of Canadian governments. The educational systems can fix, he says, can fix what is broken. This will lead to understanding. Understanding leads to respect, and reconciliation is about respect. So many schools, their brave teachers, administrators, and parents are picking up the mantra and now starting to raise what is the most competent and capable, culturally competent and capable generation in the history of this country. It will likely take many generations to heal and build a country we can all be proud of. Reconciliation begins with one very simple concept, a goal that Indigenous peoples have always sought with newcomers. I want to be your friend. I want to be your friend. I want you to be mine. When you need me, I'll have your back. And when I need you, you'll have mine. Murray Sinclair. So, as an indicator of what's happening, the National Indigenous Economic Development Corporation announced last year that Inuit, First Nations, and Métis community are leading the way in entrepreneurship in Canada with more than 50,000 businesses, contributing more than $31 billion to Canada's economy. While much remains to be done, a lot is being done. Businesses, governments, post-secondary institutions are recognizing the benefits of working together. A simple search under Indigenous and non-Indigenous people working together brings up some examples. The University of British Columbia has an Aboriginal management program. The Export Development Corporation has specific programs to assist with Indigenous entrepreneurs. Banks are working on specific programs and services for Indigenous communities. I'm going to back up here for a little context. In 1966, the idea of Aboriginal rights did not exist in Canada. Over the next couple of years, court decisions changed that, and Aboriginal rights and titles and land claims became legal. And now all provinces have a Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. And public opinion seems to be changing as well, according to an independent survey in 2023. In that survey, they said 72% agreed that Canadian corporations should include Indigenous people in their supplier networks wherever possible. 60% said that Indigenous participation in government in Canada's economy should be a priority for government. So it's truth and reconciliation. Truth comes first, and it's coming. And reconciliation will be a work in progress for some time. If we think about it, even defining what reconciliation is a problem, but people are working on it. We talked about education, and part of the process of reconciliation seems to be understanding one another. And part of that is understanding different value systems. I'll just, this will end shortly, but just one simple example. There's different values. In the 1800s, maybe even before, there was something on the northwest coast that Indigenous peoples carried out. It was called the potlatch ceremonies. Now, these ceremonies were very significant, and they were usually around births and deaths and significant events. One of the characteristics of that was the generosity of gifts. It was very important how much you could give to somebody else, particularly chiefs. Now, just to abbreviate this, the mark of a true chief was that they died poor due to the distribution of his wealth. The true standing in the community was measured not by what he had, but what he had given. So compare that to Western values, particularly which is centered around accumulation of wealth and status and such. Not everybody here, of course, but so how did the newcomers, being the Westerners, how did this idea of giving away your wealth, how did that fit with what they saw? Well, it was so insane that the Canadian government outlawed this practice. It was a celebration. They outlawed it. And in 1880, the Indian Act was amended, and any person, Indian or otherwise, participating in the potlatch could be imprisoned, and they were. This ban lasted until 1951. So for those interested who, what they might do, get me another slide here. I've listed a couple of resources. Some of you are, I know some of you are quite familiar with Indigenous matters, but these things, there's a couple of good books that I'll just mention. This 27 Things You Might Not Know About the Indian Act. This book that I'm circulating, 52 Ways to Reconcile, is interesting. I'm going to just jump down to where I say this daily, it's not a daily webcast, it's a webcast by this person, Sandy Boucher. And I've taken a couple of courses with her, but she has a weekly webcast, which is usually fairly brief, but it addresses a lot of current issues and puts Indigenous matters into context today. So I thought you might be interested. So a couple of other things. One of the things we do here, well, we do the reading program, of course, with Diane Denega, but we also have recently supported the First Nations Technical Institute. We gave them some cash, I think $500. Now, the significance of that contribution is, so for those who don't know, First Nations Technical Institute is a high quality post-secondary education institution, and they teach, among other things, Indigenous people to be pilots, primarily from remote reserves, but they teach social work, and they also go to some of the remote reserves to do their teaching. Now, for the ones that come here, you think about it, they're coming here and they're away from their families and all that jazz. But then sometimes significant events will happen where they have to go home. So that's an expensive endeavor where they have to be flown back to a reserve. Now, often what will happen is, say they're sick or maybe a family member has been injured or something. Well, often they'll get home, but then they don't have the money to get back. And so one of the money that we gave them is going to go into a fund for emergency reserves such as that. Another thing that you might want to consider supporting, well, we're familiar with honoring Indigenous people. Some of you are participating in that. And for those who don't know, that's an organization. It's called HIP in Toronto, and Rotary is very involved with that in Toronto and elsewhere. Another organization that was mentioned in my introduction is called the Outland Youth Employment Program. I'll just mention that they would welcome support. The significance of that program is, I said that program teaches life skills. The whole founding principle about that thing is teaching kids, giving them the ability and the awareness so that they can make a living and they're not going to be supported by your taxes. So anyhow, those are a couple of ideas. And that's pretty much the end. The goal today was really just to talk about the significance and relevance of Truth and Reconciliation Day and possibly inspire you to learn more or do more. Thank you.